Good morning. Welcome to the Point. The election is now just a week and a half away, and we still have important races to look at. This morning, two state representatives are vying for an open Senate seat in Kent County. It's the 29th district where Republican Chris Afendoulis and Democrat Winnie Brinks are both trying to win the seat.
Well, I think when you look at what's going to happen in the future of Michigan, we've had great things going in this state the last 8 years. We've had tremendous job growth. Revenues are up. You know, when you think about where we were 8 years ago and what the unemployment rate was, people were leaving the state. We've got people coming back. Really, now that's the challenge for the future is, you know, looking out 5, 10, 20 years. What are the policies we need to keep Michigan strong? We've done things on job training. We've done things on education, because we need young kids to be educated well and then stay here in the state. And we need to attract other people to come to the state, because you can't have job growth and revenue growth without more citizens, because we really are at a level of employment that is almost full. So how do we then take a look at getting more people into the job market? These are the kind of challenges of, you know, having a great economic situation here in the state. So I think that it's incumbent upon us, really, when you look at where does this really fall out, is, are we going to continue the policies that have generated this kind of growth and this kind of optimism for people for people to have jobs, and for wage growth and employment growth to keep moving in the right direction?
What is the state doing, and what should the state be doing to foster more of that kind of training, given that those jobs are available today?
Sure. Well, we passed the Marshall Plan for Talent, which has a number of components to it. But really, when we think about it, it's about matching up young people in high school to what future careers are available. And one of the things that is becoming more and more popular is middle college, where young people take classes at the community college while they're in high school, and by the time they graduate from high school, they've got either an associate's or a certificate, and they go right into the workforce. So, and I think then we've had, opened up our curriculum so that we can have choices for people that we're not so tight, and we can say, there are different options to fulfilling the requirements for graduation, so that we can then say, all right, that's going to be stuff that helps with employability. Because as we all know, college isn't for everyone. It's not. And we had a tendency to push young people that's the only option for them. And I've told the story a number of times. When I was young, we had auto shop, we had machine shop, all these things in my high school. And in many respects, those things are gone. And as you said, in the skilled trades, that's a huge impediment to economic growth when you don't have people that can perform those jobs. And they're great paying jobs and great careers.
At the state level, the governor responded quickly when we started talking about emerging contaminants like PFAS. He established a task force, and now we know that this is a statewide, nationwide, perhaps global problem. But the area that you represent and the one you seek to represent will be areas that we know are already impacted. So what more does the state need to be doing, and what more can be done as we start to learn more and more about this? Because even at the federal level, there is not agreement on exactly what this PFAS substance will do or does, or how to deal with it.
Well, first and foremost, and what I've focused on, and instead of trying to use this for political purposes, is what are the health impacts on people, and how are we going to respond? So, let's go back to last December. I helped marshal through the supplemental spending plan, which said, all right, we're going to now require testing of all our schools. We're going to require all municipal water systems to test, provide the funding for that, provide local health departments to be able to track and monitor and study the impacts. That was step one. That money and that testing process that was put in is what helped us find out what happened in Parchment, right? And the state reacted very quickly. So it was that testing. The other thing we did is put in place filtration in Plainfield Township in the municipal water system, which did have trace levels at, I think, 7 parts per trillion of PFAS. It's brought that down to almost negligible or non-detect. And so I focused on health and results. And that's been important to me. The other thing is, so as we go into the future, you're right. These substances are everywhere. There are some reports that we have 2 to 3 parts per trillion in Lake Michigan, which is where we get our water. So this, it's used in carpeting, it's used in clothing. There's only 2 of these PFAS that right now, or they're saying are an issue, but there's a whole class of chemicals here, and there could be new chemicals. So I think it's important to rely on sound science. And I have said consistently, when we see what the numbers should be in terms of limits, well then the state actually right now has the power, the regulatory authority to set a limit. And I think we want to make sure, like as you said, even the EPA, who has the ability to make the studies and do all the work, and the scientists, has not come out with an actual standard. And I know there's calls on the federal level to let's do that. But I think we've acted in a way that we're going to hold people accountable. We're in discussions with various parties in terms of the state is, the DEQ, on consent judgments, on how they're going to be responsible. Federal government needs to be held accountable, the Department of Defense, because at a lot of these air bases we have the PFAS contamination. So we need to hold the federal government accountable. So it's about holding people accountable, understanding what the impacts are in public health, and making sure we provide the resources to make that happen. And that's really been my focus, is finding the resources and making sure people are getting taken care of in terms of their water, in terms of public health.
This is just a very exciting year, I think, for Democrats. We've seen just so much renewed energy since the 2016 election, and so many people who realized that they needed to be more involved. And so for me, I've been in the House for 6 years, and I've been listening to constituent concerns all that time, and the same things are coming up again and again and again, and I think people are ready for change.
We'll talk about some of those issues, because obviously there are a lot of things in Michigan that are different than when you started, even 6 years ago. And some Republicans are talking more about job training, but you're talking about other things, not that that isn't important.
Yeah, no, job training, obviously very important. We need to make sure every child has a shot at moving into some sort of career that they like and that's going to pay the bills. We could do a better job with that. I came out of education advocacy before I even thought about getting involved in politics, and so that's always been a concern for me. But we have also been, for 6 years, or even more, people have been talking about the roads, how they're really inhibiting our economic growth in a long-term way. So we need to make sure that we're doing a better job addressing that. We put some money into it as a legislature, but it's not enough. And I think that the people are not fooled. They understand that we haven't done a good job with some of the really basic things that our government needs to do, from education to roads. We did expand Medicaid for people living right at, working poor, living right at the edge there, not able to afford their own health insurance. So we made some progress there, but there's still people who are really struggling with the cost of health care. They're struggling with the cost of pharmaceutical drugs that they need in order to live a good life or even stay alive. So those concerns have not gone away over the last 6 years. And so I think with so many new people coming into the legislature, we have an opportunity to take a look at those things with new eyes. And what I really am looking forward to is just this renewed sense of leadership on those issues and a willingness to work across the aisle and get some of that stuff actually done, not just halfway, but to really look at creative solutions to those problems that actually keep our constituents' needs first.
You would not be the only voice, nor would I expect you to have a total answer, but what do we do about roads? Because for the entire time that I have covered politics in Michigan, people have complained about the roads. And I've heard everything from the trucks are too heavy, the composition of the roads is wrong, there isn't enough money, we ought to be doing something else different, there's a better program somewhere else. But I never hear anything definitive. What do you think we ought to be doing?
Obviously other states have figured this out. We should be able to too. And, there's all those things that you mentioned have got to be part of our conversation. But what it comes down to is real leadership. We need an executive in the governor's chair who's going to propose a viable plan and who can bring the votes together, bipartisan, bicameral, that we can have a long-term solution. Term limits hasn't helped us in this respect because people are very focused on the few years in front of them, and I think that we've seen the ramifications of that and the negative impact of that kind of thinking, particularly on roads and education. We need long-term bipartisan solutions, and we need real leadership to make that happen.
I know you've talked about some emerging contaminants, including PFAS, and obviously the district that you seek to represent has been impacted, as have so many areas around the state. And I think as we find more and more, it may become much more common that these contaminants, PFAS and others, are out there. What is the state doing and what should it be doing?
So the state is doing a good job, I think, of trying to determine the extent of the contamination, particularly with PFAS. We need to pay some more attention to the other chemicals as well as we go through that process. But we have to be more proactive about this. We have to prevent companies from being in that position where they now face liability from previous contamination that maybe they were unaware of before. We have to hold them accountable for when they were aware of contamination and it got into our drinking water that's impacting our health, but we need to be more proactive about that. Right now we're being pretty reactive. So good job assessing the situation or getting started on assessing the situation, but we really need to be much more precautionary and much more proactive about protecting people from the contaminants in their water. And I have some bills that would do just that with PFAS. It's been really difficult to get the Republican leadership to even consider taking those up, despite the outcry from people in communities around the state that they're very concerned about this. And that's one of the basic functions of a state government, is to ensure things like water quality, and we should be doing a much better job with that.
When you are out and campaigning, and for people who don't know, this is a very time-intensive process for somebody running for state house or state senate. People in Michigan have come to expect to see those candidates show up at their doors, and that senate district gets pretty big when you start knocking on those kind of doors. What are people telling you? What do they tell you are their concerns? Obviously, you talked about education and roads. We know those are things out there. What is their view, or do they tell you, of government in general?
So, you know, I'm a big fan of knocking on doors because you can ask me questions. It might not be exactly what somebody on their front porch is going to ask me. So it gives them an opportunity to really have a good conversation with me without TV cameras around, no Russian algorithms on Facebook, nothing like that. Nobody getting in the way. And those are the best conversations. And that's one of the reasons I knock tons of doors, because I really enjoy that. And that's the people we need to be listening to, not all the lobbyists and all the talking heads, right? So that's important to me. But you know, the topics we've covered are huge: roads, education, healthcare, but also water and environmental issues, not just water. Those are all the top ones. I also hear a lot from folks about veterans issues, particularly the Grand Rapids Home for Veterans, making sure that we're doing a good job being vigilant there, ensuring that some of the improvements that have happened continue, and ensuring that we're actually serving veterans statewide in a much better way, more proactive way. So those are the big topics that keep coming up.
When we come back, yet another Senate seat, this time an open seat in the 34th District. That's next. To the Point. Welcome back to the Point. The 34th Senate District is made up of Muskegon, Newaygo, and Oceana County. Republican Senator Jeff Hansen is term limited and can't run again. Former Republican House member John Bumstead, Democrat Papi Saez Hernandez, and Libertarian Max Rixey are all running for that seat. Talk to me a little bit about the state of the race. Obviously, you've run 3 times before.
You bet.
This is a larger area than you've run in before, but the process is similar. The environment is different.
Environment's much different, but you know, I still have Oceana and Newaygo counties, but Muskegon's my new county. Lake's not in the Senate seat. So it is a different world down here, and I'm finding out the people here have the same needs as they do in Oceana and Newaygo County. It's all about listening to your constituents and helping them out. And I find that knocking doors in Muskegon has really been a pleasure, and in introducing myself to folks, and I think we're getting very good reception.
Talk about that process, because many people don't understand that when you're running for a state house or Senate seat, a lot you see television commercials, we were talking about your billboards, all of that, but it's about personal contact. You have to get out and walk those neighborhoods and knock the doors, and that takes some time.
You bet. You know, Oceana and Newaygo is very well known. I've been on the ballot for 6 years, and Muskegon was a brand new world for me. And I started in January when the snow was up to your knees, and I had to drive my old 4-wheel drive work truck because the snow was deep. And I started in all the rural townships knocking doors on primary voters, and we've got really good reception because you go to areas at that time of year when nobody's ever knocked at a door. It's too rural, and I find it's important the people out in the rural areas need to be listened to as well as people in the cities, and you represent all of them, but doing the doors is very important. They want to see you, they want to ask you questions. That one-on-one, sometimes knocking a door and with a smile on your face, it resonates with people.
What do you need to do in this area? We were talking again before we went on about what is really a renaissance for this downtown area. There's all kinds of construction, building right across the street either apartments, probably condos going up. A lot of stuff going on down here. But from an economic standpoint, there certainly has been a time when Muskegon County and all of these counties have struggled. So now that things are better and it's clear that this area is capitalizing on that, what, if you're elected, can you do to keep that momentum going?
Number one, I mentioned earlier, you need to listen. You need to listen to the business owners, need to listen to the people in Muskegon. But it's really all about finding those relationships with the business owners, but it's really about also they are looking for workers. You know, you look at all the businesses, the help wanted signs up and down these streets everywhere. And it's about career tech training. And we need to put maybe more money or more focus on how do we get these young people to apply for these jobs, because there are a lot of good jobs available out there. You know, I see a lot of them on a billboard, starting wage, $15 an hour with health care and those types of things. That's a really good starting wage anywhere in this country. And to me, it's about finding a path, a career path for these folks, not necessarily everybody needs a four-year college degree, but if we can get these young folks on a career path like I did, you know, building homes. I went to Career Tech building trade school for 2 years. It worked great for me for 35 years building homes, and it can work for other people. It's just getting that connection with the students at a younger age and getting a lot of times their parents on board, because they don't understand there's a lot of high-tech jobs in these factories.
Well, here we are, a couple of weeks before a major election. First time foray into politics. Tell me where this campaign is for you right now.
This campaign is in, I would say actually, where we are right now isn't really any different than where we've been all along, which is full steam ahead every day, every minute. We're working very hard. So we haven't really changed our work effort or, you know, our sense of urgency about the work that we're doing.
Why the urgency, and tell me what it is that you want to accomplish? Because when we talked before, it was very clear that you wanted to accomplish things that had been important to you well before you ever thought about getting into politics. So tell me about that and how that translates now that the election, the goalpost at least is in sight.
We can see it.
So talk a little bit about why you got here in the first place.
Well, I think first and foremost, I decided to run because I wanted to see people that are doing the work in community driving policy in Lansing. So, I mean, the simpler way to say that is that our government should represent the people that are casting their ballots, and I didn't feel like it was. And so I have a sense of urgency around just making that happen. You know, when I was working in the nonprofit sector, in the government sector, just in community-based settings, I was surrounded by people that looked like me driving the work. And we were pretty consistently dealing with policy that wasn't supportive of what we were trying to get done. So there's a sense of urgency around changing that dynamic. And I feel really excited about it because I think that I'm not unique in having that mindset. I think that a lot of people in Michigan and all over the country are feeling a sense of urgency about being more accurately represented by their government.
Well, expand on that. What does that mean? What policy is it that you would like to change or impact or affect that would more accurately represent people that you think Lansing or Washington isn't doing now?
I mean, so one of the simplest places I could talk about policy that would more accurately represent me and the people that I'm in community with is policy around public education. You know, I don't think it's a revolutionary act to want to send my sons to a public school and expect that they get a quality public education. So I think that our government should be legislating accordingly in a way that allows me to send my boys to public school and not worry and feel confident about the education that they're going to get and know that they can choose to go into a skilled trade or go to college and that they'll be ready to do either one of those things upon completing a high school diploma.
And how do we do that? Because the argument in Lansing has been, in my experience over the past 2.5 decades that I've been covering it, the argument always comes down to dollars and cents. But there has to be, and I don't take away from the idea that you have to spend money for education, but there has to be more to education than just dollars and cents.
Well, I agree. There does have to be more, but I think the starting point is that we need legislators who will be brave. And they will have to do things that are unpopular and challenging. And it does come down to money in the sense that we have to pay our teachers. We have to fund social workers. We have to ensure that there are the proper supports in classrooms with students with special needs. Those things all cost money. So we have to legislate accordingly. But we also have to decide as a community at the local level and at the state level that our kids are our most important resource and they are valuable to us, and we have to legislate accordingly. So it will require some courage, but I've got that.
Over the course of the years, you and I have talked about any number of offices that you've run for. You've run for this office before, if I'm not mistaken. You run for the state senate?
Yes, years ago.
So tell me what motivates you to do this, running as a libertarian in today's environment, even as you wear your Make America Great Again hat.
Well, lower taxes, less government. And I have to say I switch hats periodically, okay? All right? And I believe in less government, lower taxes, and axe a tax, vote for Max. And that's just not a saying. We need to eliminate the tax on senior citizens' homes 65 or older. And they're getting less money at that point in their life. We also need to rescind the Republican tax on senior citizen pensions. It's costing senior citizens thousands and thousands of dollars. That was a Republican tax that we didn't need to have. Plus, we need to eliminate the personal income tax. Now, the Republicans said they were going to lower it for years and years and years. The Democrats, I know, want to raise the personal income tax. You know, we want to eliminate it as the Libertarian Party. Also, if I'm elected as a state senator, I will introduce legislation to repeal the 16th Amendment, which is the federal income tax. The less money we have at the federal level is the less wars we have. I'm very much, with 32 years in the military, Vietnam War 1 year, Iraq 1 year, I'm very much against war. And Donald Trump was the only candidate in 2016 who campaigned against our involvement in wars, all these nation-building wars, which has been a disaster for the United States. You look at Syria and Iran. For 2,000, maybe 3,000 years, millions of Christians lived in those countries without any problems with the Muslims. Now most all of them are refugees. So we need less money in the federal government level. We need spend less money in the state level.
If you reduce, for example, property taxes by taking seniors off the rolls, or if you reduced the income tax or eliminate it here at the state level, that leaves some pretty gaping holes in the state budget. So what do you cut out?
Well, we need to reduce the number of people going into prisons and jails and for doing crimes with no victims. The Libertarian Party is very much on, we don't need to have all these crimes with no victims. If there's no victims, there's no crimes. Okay, if it's fraud, violence or something, of course, put them in jail, put them in prison, lock them up. But if there's no victims, there should be no crimes. And it's just, make busy work for the police, the judicial system, the courts, and focus on reducing crimes.
When we come back, we'll take a look at the week that was and the week to come. To the point. It has been a very busy week politically. Former President Barack Obama was in the state for Gretchen Whitmer and other Democrats. Vice President of the United States Mike Pence will be coming next week. The final debate between the Republican Attorney General Bill Schuette and Democratic candidate for governor, former Senator Gretchen Whitmer, was held, and we got new poll numbers that indicate that many of those races are closer now than they have been all season long. There's still a lot of time in this week and a half for more political changes. That's why I hope you'll join us. To the point.